Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with our weekly Q&A thing. You are consuming it the way that you are right now on the platform that you're on, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. So, to start off, if you're watching the video, what are people looking at?
All right, so continuing the trend of who we're anticipating as the challenge character of this week, it is a team with Dawn dressed as Wonder Woman. And Dawn dressed as Wonder Woman and New 52 Wonder Woman, who was originally called Justice League Wonder Woman, were both released around the same time. Clearly, New 52 Wonder Woman is way better. And as I'm playing more Dawn dressed as Wonder Woman, I'm appreciating some of what she does. However, all right, well, actually, maybe I should start off with the good stuff. So she heals when she does her specials. Mm-hmm. And healing does make things a little bit easier. I will grant that. There's a couple times where we were low on health, and it was a relief. Whether it would have made the difference in the fight, it was definitely a relief to see my health bump up. Mm-hmm. However, she's got so many, I guess, deficiencies when it comes to being a Wonder Woman. Her special one takes too long. There's too many steps. She can get one done during an invulnerability, which, you know, you don't really care because there's no real benefit, but it just goes to show you how slow it is, and that you start the second one will actually hit the opponent who's carrying Astro Harness. Mm-hmm. So if you were using it with Claw of Horse like we are here, you're going to shatter at most one gear. Unlike any other Wonder Woman that just does the shield toss, you could potentially shatter 3 pieces of gear.
Yeah.
Before you lose your power from doing damage. Special 2 is a little bit borked. So it does 2 main hits at the beginning, and then the last little bit where she sort of stabs her sword in the ground, and she sends damaging energy towards the opponent. That's another 2 hits, but it feels like in the animation it's sort of one kind of move after that. Mm. And it's really pretty bad because it's one of those moves where if the opponent blocks, she only gets the first 2 hits. So that's already bad. If the opponent tags in, if the opponent gets knocked out and another opponent tags in, the 3rd hit doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. The 3rd and 4th hit don't happen. You only get the first 2 hits. And if you are strong enough to knock out the opponent on the first part of the special 2, there's enough room, there's enough time between the first and second parts, but the second hit doesn't connect, and you don't get anything after that. So you are guaranteed to not do any damage on a second opponent. Mm-hmm. Unlike New 52 Wonder Woman, whose special 2 does a huge amount of damage, gives us power, and knocks more than one opponent around. All the hits are good. Mm-hmm. So not a big fan. The more I play with her, the less I like her. I mean, she's decent enough, but the actual structure of her specials doesn't make up for the deficiencies in her passive. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there we go. Do you want to move on to the first question of the week?
Sure. And we were getting through some of the older stuff that we've been saving that we never got around to, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there was something last week that we said we were going to maybe save. Was it talking about the rest of the trip?
Oh, maybe it was.
Maybe it was a little bit, because we talked about sort of the shared stuff. We talked about Montreal, but I'll just say briefly Singapore and Japan, right?
Okay, all right.
So Japan is really cool, really nice to visit. I had a lot of fun. I don't know if I have anything special to say about Japan, more so than other people would, except that it's a good time, right? I was a little bit less organized, I think, than a lot of the people I know who have been to Japan. And the reason why was because the primary purpose was a visit with family in Singapore.
Right.
But the one thing I will say is that Singapore is an absolutely lovely food country to visit, and the temperature is actually miserable. So I think it was an interesting sort of comparison point where one of the things I got mildly spoiled for in Japan is because one of the advantages of Japan, if you're used to North American food prices, is that the food is pretty reasonably priced there, and the food is often quite good, right? So they say unless you're, when I was looking at stuff online, people were saying unless you're a foodie, right? Unless you're trying to have like Michelin star places, unless you're trying to have really nice, really specific things, a lot of the time what you can just do is sort of ask a local, look for a line, something like that. And if you're just in an area and the food seems reasonably priced and it seems like there's a lot of locals eating there, then it's probably pretty good. And I did really find that. And the problem is that, Japan being a reasonably priced food city was shown up just before it by Singapore, because I think this is a big claim, right? I haven't eaten in, a ton of different countries in the world, but Singapore was very familiar to me just in terms of being a city, right? So we're in North America.
Right, because you've been there before. And
I'm just saying as a city, right? Like,
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
So Japan has a noticeably different culture and way of organizing space and a bunch of other stuff than I'm used to from North America. But I'm saying Singapore, in a lot of ways, just feels like a modern city in a way that I'm used to. It doesn't feel
like a North American city.
Yeah. But it doesn't feel massively different from what I'm sort of used to, right? There are some things, I think in a lot of Asian countries, especially like island countries like Singapore, right, where there's not a lot of like land mass, there's a sort of like an Asian mall phenomenon. But we,
Asian Mall, you mean like Pacific Mall?
Yeah, kind of like Pacific Mall. So it's literally just because when you go into Pacific Mall, how they have the smaller like stands,
sure,
and they have more of them and they're densely packed. There's a different layout and organization scheme for malls in or I see I'm saying in Asia, but I'm generalizing more than I actually have information, right? Like Asian malls that I've been to in general, right? So, for example, in Singapore, there's like an electronics mall where everything is stacked, but then they also have sort of more, and I don't know if these are Western style malls. I don't know what the term is, but more of the type of mall that I am used to as a North American, right? Where it's like larger stores, more spread out. So they have sort of both of them, right?
Right.
And so there are elements that are clearly foreign. I'm in a different country, but in Singapore, most people speak English. Right? There's a lot of familiarity, and when you're walking around, moment to moment, I don't feel like I'm in a totally new place from the ground up in terms of like culture and vibe and everything else in the same way.
Less alien to you.
It does. There's a lot of sort of familiarity in individual pieces, and so the stuff that's different is like cool, but it doesn't. It's
not as jarring.
It's not as jarring. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
But the food is ridiculously cheap and ridiculously good. And I think that I would say out of everywhere I've ever eaten, that Singapore has like the cheapest and best food and the best way of laying out access to food of anywhere I've ever been. And that's just because there are these places called hawker stands. And it is like...
Hawker, like hawk.
Like, yeah, Hawker.
Right.
And they've got all of these little stalls. They're tiny, tiny, tiny little storefronts. And so it'd be laid out in sort of like a mall or like a city block kind of area. And they're often open air or partially open air, but like on the bottom floor of like a building. And there's just like dozens, if not hundreds of little stalls. And the food is often like between $3.50 to like $8 for like a full meal size portion.
So is it cheap because of the dollar? Like
the Singaporean dollar is like worth the same.
But do the wages, I mean, the dollar might be very close, but are the wages close enough that this would be cheap for locals too?
Yeah. So what I heard from family and people who live there is that like people like who like office workers don't really pack lunches because of how cheap it is. So they're eating there consistently too. Like hawker stands are popular for you to run out and grab lunch at, right? Because they're fast, they're cheap, there's variety. And that really is a thing to me, I think, because the idea of having so many places all right next to each other means that your capacity for variety is exceptional. There's no other place that I've ever seen anywhere that you can get so many different kinds of things all right next to each other, so compressed, right? Where you just go to a hawker stand, and if you like delicious food, right, there's probably something that's going to be really good there for you. And they tend to process people fast. They you're expected to eat there. There's all these communal like cutlery and stuff, and so when you're done, there's like
communal cutlery.
No, so like in terms like each stand doesn't like have their own.
Okay.
So when you're done, you just take the trays. There's like a halal and like a non-halal like cleaning area where they keep them separated by that, and then so like you don't need to like do any sort of management. It's like a big cafeteria,
Right.
Right? With all of the efficiencies that come from a cafeteria, but with like none of like the downsides in terms of variety or anything else.
So how that's different from a food court because
It's like a food court, but better.
okay.
Because there's more stands. They're more tightly packed.
Right.
The prices are more reasonable. There's a lot of stuff that it's not like chains, right? Like it's a lot of like people just doing their own food
Right.
stuff, right?
Right.
I think most of them are not chains. Although I haven't tried enough different hawker stands, like, maybe somewhere else in Singapore, there's another person with the exact same branding or whatever. I don't know how I would know, right?
Right.
But they're not at least framed as if they were chains. And the food is really incredible. And so, you could easily, if you wanted to eat cheap, you could probably spend like $3-4 on a meal and be satiated. And if you really wanted to, and you were getting variety, like I was there with one other person, right? With my mom, and you would have been really hard pressed to even spend $20 on a meal if you were getting like
For one
dessert,
person?
snacks, drinks for two people.
For two people.
For both of us.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then we went to Japan and people were like, oh, the convenience stores, right? They're so reasonably priced and the food is so good for like a convenience store. And it was funny because I think I was in some ways a little bit spoiled because I was in one of the only places I've ever been that the food was cheaper and basically just as convenient. For what it is, I think it's more convenient because you're getting like hot, like fresh, like
So
food.
maybe it's not so much the convenience, but the quality. Like the convenience might be comparable, but you're getting better prepared.
It's only marginally less convenient. It is
Right.
cheaper,
Right.
and it is exceptionally tasty. And so, like I had a really nice time with the konbinis and everything. And I will say that if I wasn't visiting family, I don't know if Singapore would have been a place that I would.
Right. It wasn't on your
necessarily-
radar as a place that you needed to visit.
And I would also say, having been there, I wouldn't feel a super strong draw to go back. I would rather go back to Japan on the balance for all the stuff that it provides if I wasn't just visiting family. But
Right.
if like you are into food and don't mind heat, it's such a exceptional. It's a really exciting thing. It's not one of the things that I talked about when we went to Japan with the conveyor belt sushi is that there was this one place that we went back to a couple times that was nice and cheap. And then on one of the later nights, we were looking at different places to eat, and there was a conveyor belt place, and we were looking it up, and the price was high enough. And the thing that I was talking about is the problem is not just the amount of money that you spend, because, we're talking like $23 for sushi for two people, right? Which is super reasonable. And then the other place would have been maybe 50-60% more expensive, right? Or even double, right? I don't know, but like it would have been a certain amount more. And so it wouldn't have been totally unreasonable, right? You would have gotten a meal and I probably would have eaten more and better sushi for a cheaper price than I could have here. But what we're talking about is the psychological difference when it goes from cheap enough that you stop needing to think about what you're getting. You can get one of the more expensive plates. You can get exactly what you want. You can just keep getting plates until you're full and not think about it and not worry about it at all. Versus a place where each plate can't, like the medium and higher price plates can be expensive enough that you go, oh, do I really want this sushi that I'm going to enjoy more? Because it's going to be this amount more expensive. And so it's not even the price. It's the fact that the price changes how you order and changes the quality of your experience. It makes you, think about the price instead of just getting exactly what you want. And it makes you not get something that you want to save a little bit of money, right? And that sort of hump, there's sort of a break point, right? Where the price makes your experience worse in a way that's separate from just what it ends up tallying up to on the bill.
Right. It's how it presents it, so it makes you more aware of the difference in price.
In Singapore, everything at the hawker stand is under that threshold, right? So everything you could ever want, you are at worst fine with it, and at best, like, absolutely delighted by how cheap you're getting it for. Right?
Yeah, because there's a joy. There's something separate from just the quality of food if you're getting it really cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to ask then, when you're talking about eating in those communal areas, is there any place that's air conditioned? Or are they all like you're sweltering in the heat?
In those communal areas, you're a little bit sweltering. There is, towards the edges, they're often, facing the street. So there's a little bit of breeze potentially. And there's shade, right? Because you're in a building. So I'm sure there's like fans and stuff running, but there's not really AC. And there's not a lot of AC. There's like AC in the malls and some of the inside spaces, but
But none of those hawker stands are inside spaces then?
No. The buses have really nice AC, actually, in Singapore. So there's a...
But they're not sure. I guess in my mind, I'm just trying to sort of imagine the eating experience.
You're marginally sweltering.
Yeah.
You need like a cold drink, but then the cool thing is that you'll get like a cold drink and it'll be like a nice fruit juice that somebody like fresh presses for you, and it's like,
Right. Right.
$2.15 or something like that, right?
So when you were talking about all the eating and people not packing lunches, and because it was so cheap.
That's what we were told anyways by our family.
Sure. One of the things that strikes me is because I'm listening to Inventing the Renaissance by Ada Palmer, and one of the, not related to the main thrust of it, but one of the assertions that she makes is that it's only relatively recently that there's been this idea that home-cooked meals are how we should be eating.
Yeah.
That historically, it goes so far back that a great majority of people would eat out. Whether it's...
like most of the time, or?
Yeah, most of the time.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not sure the proof behind it. I trust Ada Palmer. She's a historian, so I can't imagine that she'd make any kind of assertion that would be outrageously wrong.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to me that the way that's happened in North America is that we've almost priced ourselves out of that. Where if you wanted to eat out most of the time, it's actually really expensive. There's not a lot of places where you can eat healthy at a reasonable price where the extra cost of doing it is not so much that it's more than just the convenience, right? Because there's a huge amount of convenience in not preparing your own meals. And there is a huge cost in North America where the food cost is maybe supposed to be, like most restaurants, they price it at a third, right? I think that's how they plan it.
Yeah.
And that when they make the food, that they have to charge 3 times as much in order to make up for the fixed cost.
And restaurants are still famously a place that has not great margins and are really hard to keep afloat.
Sure.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to me because when you talk about food like that in Singapore and in Japan too, is that I'd imagine that you can't... people would not be able to eat out so much if they were paying as much of a markup as they are in North America.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things...
And eat healthy, because fast food, I think, is a different kind of...
SMBC and the Wienersmiths. I forget... I think it was a book by Zach Wienersmith, the comic artist of SMBC, where he was talking about how the thing that makes space travel and doing stuff in space so uncommon is it's absolutely a cost per kilogram thing. Where if you could like cut in half the cost per kilogram of getting a thing into space, that it would absolutely transform the way that you handled space flight. And I think a lot of stuff is like that, right? Where when you talk about like technology, like...
Well, that was when they talked about MP3s and stuff, when the cost of data became cheap enough. There's so many other applications that became possible, like Netflix.
Yeah, so much stuff, I think, undergoes a paradigm shift, not when the technology exists, because there's already a huge amount of technology that would be massively, transformative for a higher percentage of the population to have, like even like a 2%, 3%, 5% higher percentage of the population to have like easy access to, right? When you think about like phones, right? Having the amount of power in a phone was not the issue. It was getting it, the thing that makes phones better is the battery life, right? You could pack a bunch of power into a phone already. The thing is that like
battery
after
life,
a certain point,
data cost.
Yeah. So I think in a lot of ways, like in Singapore, for sure, and I think in Japan to a lesser extent, the price of food, right? The price of a meal being able to be that much lower totally transforms your relationship to eating out, right? Where, when I look at nice home cooked dinners that I'm making and as I'm cooking more and I've got like a little spreadsheet, right, that I maintain with my girlfriend, and we do like price proportion of all the meals that we cook, right? The price proportion of the meals that we're making at home is pretty comparable actually to the price of a lot of the meals that we were eating in Singapore.
Right.
So when I'm looking at that, right, the math, and I don't know if groceries are cheaper in Singapore, right? Because I wasn't, cooking groceries in Singapore, but I would imagine that they were at least a little bit cheaper. But when you actually run the numbers, it does totally make sense to eat out a lot more if you want food, right? The amount of time saved, the amount of, just how good it is.
Sure.
Makes the math so different.
And part of it will maybe even be the climate. When you're cooking at home and you've got a kitchen and you're generating more heat inside. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think you mentioned something about how the use of air conditioning is different too. So I remember in Hong Kong that Hong Kong was wickedly hot and humid. And people would dress warmly because they knew where they would end up would have very cold air conditioning. So they were dressing for where they ended up, and they would suffer in the heat in sweaters, so that when they finally got where they were going, they could be sort of comfortable.
Yeah.
So is it like that?
I wasn't there quite long enough to really get a sense of it. I think most people have personal fans and most people dress pretty for the heat. And I also think, well, although there are some people who are dressed with enough clothes that I was like, I just don't know how you are even surviving like this. So maybe those people were dressed for where they're ending up.
And so
I don't have insight on as to why.
I guess the related question then is, does Singapore use air conditioning like Hong Kong, where they would just blast it indoors?
So I do think that most of the shops do. The family that we were visiting did not really in their house. Mm-hmm. So it's hard for me to say, right? Because I have exactly one piece of data and I don't know how to extrapolate that at all. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But anyways, that was a lot longer talking about this than I thought I was going to, but we had some stuff to say. So let's do at least one question, because we might have to end off a little early today.
Yeah.
Because this one comes from, and this is hard because there's a bunch of ways to cut up this name. Sapir Me Dark Rebel Len is one way to do it. You could do Sapirm Dark Rebellion, and that could be a different language, like maybe German, right? Like, I don't know what Sapir means, but it could be like Supreme Dark Rebellion, right?
The Krebs
7164.
Krebs energy cycle, there's a Kreb in there. Krebellen.
Kreb, yeah, it could be Kreb Ellen, but Sapir is like the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, right? So there's a guy named Sapir.
I have no idea.
The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is that language influences thought. So like the language that you have access to influences how you think about things. And like one of the examples of it is like colors, right? Where you're better at differentiating colors that your culture has names for, like common names for, than, and you're really good at determining that boundary, and you're not so good at determining differences within that boundary.
That was, or spoiler, if you haven't seen Arrival, clearly you're a few years behind. But that was the idea, one of the ideas behind Arrival, where the aliens had a different language.
And it gave them access to different ways of thinking.
It gave them access to time travel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is, okay, so that's interesting.
That's the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, and there's been criticism of it. It's a big point of discussion. It's interesting to look into, both the hypothesis and the ways that people have tried to verify it, and the criticisms and counteracting of it. It's a nice little microcosm sort of the nuances of psychology and psychological research, and how hard it is to pin down evidence for stuff. But it's also kind of fun because you get to start from this very pop psych place of like, you can watch a Vox video being like, did you know? Right. And then you can dig into what the criticisms and the sort of discussion cycle is around it. So that's anyways. So they ask, why do some challenges give gold and gear locker packs and the rest give bronze and silver packs?
So there's no real reason. I mean, we can talk about some of the historical stuff. So the ones that commonly did that were the Suicide Squad ones.
Yeah.
And there was a point in time where if you're playing the game now and you didn't play it 10 years ago, you miss out on how the mobile game used to be a promotional tool.
Yeah, basically just used to be ads. Well, for the Suicide Squad stuff, it was actually promotional for the movie.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So that was an extension of its original intent, where when the Suicide Squad movies came out, they timed the original Suicide Squad promotions, the multiplayer seasons, with it. And so to drum up, to make it even a little bit more exciting and stand out more, they would do these really special challenges where not only would you get gear packs, like better gear packs than you would otherwise, you would have fewer fights in each ladder. Sometimes there would be no restrictions on what characters you would need to be able to finish it.
Yeah.
To get as many people playing and as many people excited as possible. So
Yeah, they just wanted you to feel good about Suicide Squad.
sure. And when you look at some of the Superman skins, one of them was is meant to model Henry Cavill. The Suicide Squad Jokers are meant to be like Jared Leto.
Yeah. The Arkham Knight stuff is meant to be an advertisement for the Arkham Knight games. Or the Batman Arkham games, right? Specifically the Arkham Knight one.
Right. So, I mean...
Same with... I mean, I don't think Arkham Origins was advertising it, but that is from the Arkham Origins video game.
So as much as we can't get into the heads of the developers and the people who are running the show, I think there's a pretty good case to be made for how it played out, that a lot of it, these differences, which I guess were coded in the game and it's easier for them to just run it the same way, was a big part of how they were promoting, using it to promote other games.
App being used as a marketing product. And so it's a more effective marketing product when they make you feel special about something. So you go, oh, look, there's a movie coming out, and guess what? You get to play with the characters from the movie, and guess what? We're going to give you a bunch of extra goodies related to... well, not the goodies weren't directly related to it, but we're going to give you a bunch of extra goodies for this event that is all tied in with the release of the movie.
Yeah. And so what's interesting to me is I feel like that's part of what made it such a good free-to-play game. So it's one of the games that looked good. It had good sort of play. I don't know what do you call that? Like the way it
mechanics,
plays. Mechanics. All right. So yeah, the game mechanics. And yet, because it was used as promotion, it didn't lean so heavily into the packs that you had to pay money for until much later in the game's life cycle.
The value being provided to the company was separate from the value that they were extracting directly from its players in terms of monetization.
Right.
And that means both ads and other like in-app purchases.
Yeah.
So they could get their value from it without being extractive of value from the user base, which is, I think, great.
So I think, I mean, that's just my perspective as somebody who's playing it at the time. And I didn't play a lot of other games, but I heard people talking about other games and how a lot of it was very much play to win.
Yeah, I think, or pay to win.
Play
to win is the good one.
Pay to win or free to play.
I think the other side that you get is when you go way on the indie side and they don't need nearly as much value to sustain themselves. They don't need to justify it on a balance sheet anywhere. And what they need is enough money to sustain themselves. And then anything after that is kind of gravy. You get some really good monetization in those kinds of games as well. Anyways, I think that's a good place to end it off for the week. So to finish up, we'd like to give a huge thank you to our lovely patrons on Patreon. That is a thank you to...
Michael Devries, Irvin Ruiz, Hoshi127, Nora Klimek, and Miguel, who are supporting us on the credited level.
There we go. Thank you so much, and thanks so much to all of you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Komoda.